Oh, are we live? Are we actually doing this thing? Are we live? Oh, okay. I am live. Great. What's up, everyone? How you guys doing? Wasn't even really ready yet. Oh, cool. You guys can see all that. That's awesome. Let me pull some stuff up here. Let's get set. I'll get talking to you in 1 second. There we go. What's going on, guys? A little bit of technical difficulties to get started. This is the initial stream, and there's like half of you here. I think E's are really the only one here, so. And I thought I couldn't go live, and then I selected the go live button, and it was love two-factor authentication, don't you? Great. Great. What's up, E? It is a new Robert. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this off of right here, being that I am going hatless, as you are saying. I'm trying to get all my controls set up. I've got a whole new streaming setup. Got to set up a few things. Let me step away for 2 seconds. Hang on there, E. I will be right back. Don't go nowhere. There we go. Now I'm back. Now I'm here. I just kind of can't see my chat. And so that's a little bit behind. Let me move a few screens around, and then I promise you guys we can get started. As if I'm not delaying you. E, I need to kind of know what's going on a few things. I need to know what's going on the Tony D'Angelo front. Do you have me covered in terms of the Kennedy podcast? I feel like we haven't heard from the Kennedy podcast in forever. And anything else you got going on? Let me just get my chat right in front of me, and then we are good to go. This is fascinating, I know. There we go. I got that there. I've got you there. Let's see. Let me just get my. Now, if I can get my chat. All right. The chat is finally live. And let me catch up on everything E has to say. Okay, so he's catching me up on the Tony D stuff, which is great. Sucks that we won't get Zilla Fatu versus John Cena. More on Umaga in a minute, in case you haven't snapped. How many clicks to hear what happened on the other channel? Ooh. And Kennedy updating on some of that. Well, I'm glad you're still in it, E. I'm glad you're still keeping pace with that show and with everything that you got going on. Nobody follows wrestling on the internet quite like E. Now, in terms of your other question, E, what happened at the other channel? I wish I had a better story for you. I really wish I do, but I don't. What happened at the other channel is that the other channel is in transition. In case you haven't seen, there was a new interview up there recently. Me, Rob, the Nocturnal Knockout, which this isn't, is still very much part of that channel and that universe. That's always been the agreement that I have with Dom. And hopefully going forward, whenever we get a few things sorted out, get some I's dotted and T's crossed, when we get all of that going, the Nocturnal Knockout will return on its regular schedule. So don't worry, Nocturnal Knockout is not going anywhere. It's just kind of on hiatus for right now. But on that note, for right now, we do have some pretty fun stuff to talk about, to break down. So I decided on the debut pilot edition of my channel, Robbed by Wrestling, I thought, you know what? We should just take a look at every single John Cena singles pay-per-view opponent. I did it. I went back. I did the hard work. It was brutal. Scouring just the bottoms of the barrel of Cage Match and Wikipedia to confirm some of this. So I think I have a pretty accurate accounting of every John Cena singles pay-per-view opponent that he ever faced. We're going to put him on a tier list. And it's going to be fun because this is going to be a little bit of a journey through the career of John Cena. Think of this as my version of John Cena's career retrospective. And we'll go through it by breaking down his pay-per-view opponents. Not only are we going to break down his pay-per-view opponents in somewhat of a chronological order, but I'm going to give you little tidbits on almost every match that he had. There's my dryer just clicked too. Again, new show, new setting. We're getting this figured out. No, I was not Stone Cold sober. Stone Cold summer. Not Zach and Dom's fault. Those are just the guys who run things. So technically it's their fault, but I should clarify, there's no issues between any of us. It's just a channel in transition. That's all that's going on there. Nothing more, nothing less. Studio Sport One, right? Go ahead and check it out. We've rebranded a few times. There's been a few mergers and all that. Got an interview up right now with Vince Russo. Go check that out. It's doing very well. John Cena's been doing plenty of interviews. I got to catch up on his Chris Van Fleet stuff. Maybe E, you've got that down? Let me know about that. We've got Cena's on everywhere. And that's what we're doing, right? We're in the stretch run of Cena's career. So we might as well go ahead and break it all down. Now, a minute ago, when I went to go grab something else, I left something else over there. So now it'll be about another 10 seconds, and then we'll really start. because I would die, E, if I took a shot for every John Cena opponent. So by my count, we're going to have about 41 to 40 unique pay-per-view opponents here. And let's go in chronological order. I got a little quiz for all you out there. And by all you out there, it might just be E. But my little quiz is going to be, can you tell me John Cena's first ever singles pay-per-view opponent? I'll hang up and listen. You got to remember, we're going back to the early 2000s here. This is 2002. Yeah, I don't know that to the. I've seen that clip of Cena saying that he wanted to work the full schedule. I don't even know if that would have been feasible or even smart, but you would have liked for them to at least given us a little bit more than what they gave us. I sure as hell would. I don't think that was enough. And this whole run has been really dissected. That's part of what Cena's, if you've noticed, that's kind of what Cena's out to do this week of the many pieces that he's of the many things that he's promoting. And he's promoting a lot of stuff right now. But with everything he's got going on, part of what he also has to sell to the public, it seems like, is the notion that that the heel turn was a disaster, which we've already known, but he really has to like sell the why of it. He has to sort of like reclaim it. And I've seen Nick Khan, Triple H has talked about this. It's like no one wants to really take credit for how the heel turn went. And I get it. It was a disaster, so who wants to take credit for a disaster? But I still think it's a little bit disingenuous how everyone's been talking about it. All right. Well, thanks for that update, E. Okay. Let's break down John Cena's pay-per-view opponents. So John Cena's first ever opponent on pay-per-view was none other than the man that may be returning to WWE very, very soon, and someone that I don't think we often associate with Cena. But I'm talking about one Mr. Chris Jericho. Yep, that's right. Chris Jericho was John Cena's first ever singles pay-per-view opponent. Believe it or not, LOL, Cena won. He defeated Jericho at 614 at Vengeance 2002. Nobody remembers that. Nobody remembers it. I think if you were to ask me what John Cena's first pay-per-view opponent, I might have said another lower card person, or I might have said Brock Lesnar. But I would not have thought of Jericho. When I think of Jericho and Cena, I think of the set of matches that they had in the summer of 05. Specifically, you had Cena versus Jericho in the SummerSlam main event. If you remember, that's the way that Chris Jericho went to his initial part-time schedule that he went on starting in 2005. Now, he'd come back, and every time Jericho comes back, he's a little bit different than the other part-timers because Jericho doesn't really work as a part-timer. He works as a full-timer when he's back, and then he goes away for a little while. Jericho's been gone a while now from both companies, and it feels like both companies are just dying to get him back in the door. I don't know where you guys are at with it, but because I didn't get the impression that there was a lot of warm feeling towards Jericho at the end of his AEW run. Where do we rank him as one of John Cena's opponents? Because he didn't just face him in 2005. He also faced him in a series of matches towards the end of 2008. If you recall, Cena was hurt in the back half of 2008, and Jericho had got really hot in the feud with Shawn Michaels. So hot that CM Punk couldn't even lose his title. Well, he lost it, but he couldn't even drop his title properly. When we add it all up, that's 4 total matches that these two had. I'm going to say he's an important opponent. He's one of the two opponents that I think was most critical in getting John Cena booed for the majority of his career. But I don't think it's a classic rivalry. And for as important as those few matches may have been, and as significant as it being one of his initial opponents, and for as big as those matches were in 2008, I can't rank Jericho any higher than B tier as one of John Cena's opponents. Moving on. The next person we're going to go with is the person I think many of you probably thought was John Cena's additional pay per view opponent. Definitely his first main event pay per view opponent for sure. And actually, his second singles match on a pay per view was this person. Of course, you know I'm talking about the Beast, Brock Lesnar. Another person who recently returned, someone we thought we were done with, and is back and is lingering. And if you follow the reports, you follow what's going on, he's probably going to be a pretty big part of WrestleMania. He's already in all the advertising for the event, although they kind of talk around his existence in general. Cena and Lesnar have faced tons of times. By my count, in terms of singles action, they have 5 matches against each other. That doesn't include the triple threat they had at the Royal Rumble or any other multi-person matches they were a part of. Although Brock generally isn't a part of a lot of multi-person matches, despite the fact that his most recent match was a multi-person match. It is what it is. But if you look back at Cena's career, Cena got that early title shot at Backlash 03 that we all remember. It's a really good match for it being what it was, for as new as both guys really were. I mean, these are two members of the class of 02. And so not a lot of guys with tons of experience. But it was still a fine, not actually a main event. If you recall, Goldberg Rock was the main event. And you also had the Raw 6-man going on. After that, you have, in my opinion, maybe the best Brock Cena match was Extreme Rules 2012. That's right after Brock Lesnar returned after his initial hiatus to the UFC. That was an amazing match. The only wild about that match is that Brock didn't win. But that was such a brutal match. It was awesome. I could watch that match all day, every day. I think it's one of the best matches they ever did, with the exception of Cena winning, which didn't fit the tone at all. They also faced a couple years later, infamously, 16 suplexes in 1606 at SummerSlam. I know he being Brock, said Suplex City in the match at WrestleMania 31 against Roman Reigns, but Suplex City really and truly was born at that SummerSlam. They would also face a month later at the Night of Champions. It would end in a DQ. There was a near cash-in, and that's how they got out of that. Now, most recently, Brock Lesnar squashed John Cena at WrestlePalooza, kicking off the ESPN era in grand fashion. I wonder why they're not so happy with everything that's going on. All of that said, I think it's unquestioned that Brock Lesnar was a top-tier opponent for Cena. One of his greatest rivals, although you kind of almost feel like they would have met more despite the fact that they met so many times. A lot of these meetings were very spread out. Because of the nature of Brock's career, I think he just didn't end up in an extended rivalry with Cena. Now, Brock ended up in some of these extended rivalries. Like, look at how many times he faced Roman or how many times he faced Undertaker. I think Cena is more of a rival of his as a class of 02 member. And I think everyone, with the exception of Orton, has the same sort of proximity to Cena. It's kind of like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James being rivals. Yes, they played the same position, or they didn't play the same position. Yes, they played the same sport at relatively the same time, but they didn't face off a ton. They were just around the same time in competition for the top of the sport. Again, unquestionably a big opponent for him. I can't put it on S tier, though. There's just not enough meat to their matches to put it S tier. I think their matches are significant enough. So I'm going to say Brock is an A tier John Cena pay-per-view opponent. Moving it right along. Why, of course. Getting the heavy hitters out of the way right away. Another person that I'm actually really sad it doesn't have more pay-per-view matches against John Cena. But someone who is extremely instrumental to John Cena's career, specifically on his first night. And no, I'm not talking about Kurt Angle. I'm talking about this guy right here, pictured as Big Evil. Now, I put Big Evil up there, not to clown him and clown on Big Evil. I mean, if I clown on him too much, I'm gonna pay, I'm gonna pay, I'm gonna pay. But it was basically that version of The Undertaker that infamously shook hands with Cena in the backstage segment with that endorsement to Cena after the ruthless aggression that Kurt Angle asked for and he received. They did face, though, shortly thereafter. Well, actually, a year after, I should say. The Undertaker defeated John Cena at Vengeance 03. And if you recall, this was like a pretty interesting feud. I think they actually had a few matches on SmackDown. They had like a long SmackDown main event in the course of this, and it was like Cena standing up for Charlie Haas and a few other guys, and really this old versus new thing. And again, kind of like the Brock match, you knew that Cena was going to lose. Like this is not the time of Super Cena. This well predates Super Cena. Well, it's A tiered. He's not number 8 overall. He's just an A tier opponent. K-Fed didn't face K-Fed at a pay-per-view. I really wanted a match against K-Fed because when I initially made this list, I actually had K-Fed on the list of like all-time rivals, but that kind of took too long. I realized the pay-per-view list was kind of a little bit more of what I wanted it to do. The other time The Undertaker faced John Cena was that BS match at WrestleMania 34, which wasn't even really a match. Undertaker looked like he was in the best shape he had ever been. I wish we would have got more than like a minute and a half squash of John Cena. This supposed dream match that we had waited years for that seemed like it was never going to happen. And it still never really did. I can't put The Undertaker in D tier because he didn't technically face Cena at a WrestleMania, and that was an important part of that WrestleMania. Plus, he is really important to Cena's career. Taker's going to hang out in C tier. He's going to be really mad. Really, really mad at that. I wonder if him and Michelle are going to like talk about that, with the whole 1 to 1.5 viewers that I've got right here. I wonder if Michelle and Mark are watching this and thinking, why the hell am I that far down from Jericho? There's going to be other people that The Undertaker had a much better career than that he's kind of further down than. Them's is the breaks. All right. Next up, another iconic opponent for John Cena. And one he faced a few more times than maybe we all remember. Of course, I'm talking about my fellow baldy Kurt Angle. Man, he's got a nice head of hair. I really like everything that Angle's got going on. I think that's the way that the American man needs to present himself. I mean, he's an American hero, so why shouldn't all men present themselves like that? Kurt Angle's huge in John Cena's career. I don't know if he would be the one, but I want to say Cena inducted Angle, right? And it would be appropriate for Kurt Angle to induct John Cena. Again, not a ton of matches because the bulk of John Cena's prime, Kurt Angle spent in TNA, having really good matches with AJ Styles and beating the main event Mafia and all that. Hopefully being healthy. Actually, we know he wasn't healthy, but that was the idea, right? But Angle's very important to Cena. Now, we can't include that initial match in this calculation, the debut of Cena. Obviously, that's huge in Cena's career, and it being Kurt Angle helped make it big. It's a concept that John Cena translated into the Open Challenge that Ilya Dragunov is doing now, that essentially the NXT main roster exhibitions at the last time is now is based off of. All of that goes back to that initial encounter with Kurt Angle. But that wasn't on pay-per-view. he did face Kurt Angle a few times on pay-per-view. He actually faced him back in 03 at No Mercy. Again, nobody remembers any of these SmackDown pay-per-views from like 2003. There's a lot of just crap on there. That was an interesting time, wasn't it? But then you have a series in 2005, which I think really was the series that completely helped Cena get booed. It was Jericho and Angle, and then eventually led to Triple H, and that's where the full-on anti-Cena sentiment really got going. You could throw Edge in there as well, because I think Edge was important to that. But they did have the number one contender match earlier at, I want to say it was No Way Out 05, but wasn't that? No, that's not the case. They did not have that. They did have a few matches. Yeah, there's no way that happened. They did have matches later in 05, though, after Cena had come over to Raw in the de facto trade with Batista. And Kurt Angle won the first one by DQ. John Cena won the second one. Go back and watch that feud. They were trying to do everything they could to get cheers onto John Cena. And the sacrifices that they made to the Kurt Angle character to get that done are next level. I'm filling between B tier and C tier here. Again, it's like 3 matches on pay-per-view. And the matches themselves don't stick out. They really don't. I am going to say he's at the upper, he's definitely ahead of where Undertaker would be on the C tier. But for right now, he's going to be C tier. If I look at it later and it looks like he doesn't belong in there, I totally reserve the right to move Angle up. But for right now, he'll be C tier. Moving it right along. One of the most iconic early John Cena opponents, and when the first person that John Cena ever won a title off of, Mr. Paul White, the Big Show. Big Show and Cena felt like they were always facing. How many main events of Raw did these guys have over the years? How many times did it feel like we were just going to go back to Cena versus Big Show? How many times were we going to watch Cena give an AA or a FU, as it was called at the time, onto Big Show, and we would all be very impressed by it, because after all, it is pretty darn impressive. You have, as I mentioned, John Cena's first ever title, U.S. title that apparently is kind of sentimental to John Cena. He defeated the Big Show in the opener of WrestleMania 20. What a time it was when John Cena was in the opener of WrestleMania. He then had a series of matches with him where essentially, if you recall, John Cena was kind of feuding with The Miz, but having the matches with the Big Show. I don't know what the reasoning was behind that, but that's the direction that they went in. So you had Cena defeating the Big Show at Judgment Day 09. He got me with that one. And then you had Cena defeating him at Extreme Rules 2009. And again, these were all both basically proxy feuds with The Miz. You also had them meeting again in... No, they didn't meet. Did they meet in 20? Yes, they did. They met in 2012 again on pay-per-view. So you have a few matches. Nothing spectacular outside of the WrestleMania win. I think he was a very good opponent for Cena. He was a pretty consistent opponent for Cena. But he goes in the C tier. And in case you're not watching the chat replay on here and you're watching this later, E had a great comment asking if I was cosplaying as the Big Show. Not this version of the Big Show that we're seeing here on this photo. This version of the Big Show has hair and stuff. This version, I'd be like the Little Show. No, the Little Show was Spike, right? The Medium Show, the Unathletic Show The Hardly Watched Show. Why is Morgantown, West Virginia calling me? Do you think they refinance my house that I don't own? Shut up. All right. You know what I'll do, E? If I can get this channel to monetization status, I will do a whole stream in a Big Show style singlet. But we have to get this channel monetized. If we get that going, E, I'll do a whole tribute to the Big Show. How about that? That's funny. I'm glad you understand now, E, that that Brock was in an 8 tier. He was an A tier. A. The first vowel, the first letter. Okay. So far, Big Show has been our most unimpressive wrestling career that we put down. And Big Show has an amazingly impressive wrestling career. Big Show, The Undertaker, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Brock Lesnar. Basically, first ballot Hall of Famers. Well, the next opponent, not so much. You guys know who I'm talking about? This is who I think of when I think of early John Cena pay-per-view opponents. Do you even know who that is? That is Rene Dupree. Now, Rene Dupree, part of La Resistance, if you recall. This is after La Resistance, and they send him over to SmackDown. And we have here Rene Dupree. Big muscles. And that's the only good thing I can say about him as a wrestler. 100% has big muscles, though. Can confirm. Really bulky. So what are we going to do? What do we do with Rene Dupree? He had one match for the U.S. title at Judgment Day 04. We are going to put Rene Dupree in the D tier. The best part about any of those segments, and not necessarily this version of Rene Dupree, but the La Resistance stuff, was JR's commentary. I could hear JR, in his patriotic coded commentary, just anytime. Anytime hearing him bash Rene Dupree, Sylvain Grenier, Rob Conway, the Spirit Squad. I can listen to JR just bury all of those people. All right. What? No argument about Rene Dupree being S tier or being D tier. It'd be S tier. That'd be the problem. Okay, next up, someone who had a much better career than Rene Dupree, but not a ton of interaction with Cena, but some. I'm talking, of course, about Booker T. Now, again, Booker T spent the end of his prime in TNA at the time when John Cena was just beginning and getting his prime going. So they didn't have a ton of interaction. And beyond that, a lot of the pay-per-view main events that Booker T would go on to have in the company happened on the SmackDown side, many of them against Batista, not against Cena. So he was specifically positioned opposite to him. But on the rise up, they did have several matches for the U.S. title. They actually had, in a playoff of the Benoit Booker T best of series in WCW, they had a best of 5 with John Cena and Booker T for, as you would have guessed, the U.S. title. With John Cena winning both of the matches that were on pay-per-view. So John Cena got the win here. It was a nice little program for him. It helped build him. But nothing that much greater of significance. So he's going to hang out right out there on the C tier. Our C block is getting a little full. I'm hoping we get some people that we can, in more good faith, fill up all around. I think we have a pretty elite opponent coming up. I didn't say a great wrestler or anyone you actually want to see or hear from all the time. JBL, though. Extremely, extremely important in the career of John Cena. I don't know. John Cena only won his first ever world title off of this guy. Yep, he did that. WrestleMania 21. Did a main event. Batista was the true top guy at that point. Don't argue with me. It's true. He then went on to have the bloodiest match ever. How did people not know how to blade when they faced JBL? Why did Eddie Guerrero and John Cena just turn into these horror movie characters? Were they so mad at having to face JBL? Is that what it was? What turned him into that? I don't know. So they have that series in 05, and then Cena moves over to Raw, and their paths diverge for a couple of years. JBL even goes into a little bit of a hiatus, kind of a retirement, but he returns in late 07, early 08, has a few big feuds, and eventually finds himself back feuding with Cena. And these feuds were nothing feuds, but they were a throwback to something that had been very important in the past. You have their match at Judgment Day, which John Cena wins, and then you have their first blood match at Extreme Rules 08. Fun match, bloody match, if I recall, as well as their parking lot brawl. That was fun. The Great American Bash 2008, though, is a terrible pay-per-view. I remember buying that and just instantly feeling regret. Back then, I had a lot less money than I have now. I don't have that much money now, but back then, buying a pay-per-view was a big financial decision. I kind of made it on a whim for Great American Bash 08. No one should have done that. They also faced for the world title at the Royal Rumble in 09. Match I didn't really remember, but had significance. Due to all the significance in his career and the high profile, especially of the first match, and what it really, really did mean to Cena's career and the role it played, we're going to keep JBL as a B tier opponent. He's almost hit an A tier. And it's crazy. Like JBL was going to be ahead of Jericho, but they kind of serve, I think, very similar purposes, although even amongst this crew, I would put JBL's contribution to Cena's career, at least, a little bit higher. All right, we're chugging right along here. Look, this one's going to go S tier. Spoiler. But let's break it down. Perhaps John Cena's most iconic opponent that he was not going to face on the retirement run unless something really crazy happens in the next few hours, which I don't think is going to be the case. But our first true S tier on here, hide your wives. It's Edge. Oh, yeah. Edge is S tier for sure. So they have a ton of pay-per-view battles. Not as many as he had with Orton, but a good amount, and they were all extremely significant. First off, and you can't really call this a pay-per-view match proper, but they did face for Edge's first ever world title win. Well, it was kind of like I would say, Money in the Bank cash-in. Not a real match. I don't know why I had to be all facetious like that. You guys know it. You guys are wrestling fans, right? You guys weren't robbed by wrestling. You guys know what's up. So Edge cashes in for his first ever title. First ever Money in the Bank cash-in happens after the big Elimination Chamber match at New Year's Revolution 06. Cena wins the belt back at the Rumble in 06. I always forget New Year's Revolution took place in 06. That, to me, in my brain, even though it's called New Year's Revolution, my brain has that coded as a 05 pay-per-view. They actually, we're not counting it here. They did face in the triple threat the month after WrestleMania too. But then you fast forward it to the huge matches that are very notable that happened in 2006. You have first the match in Boston at SummerSlam where Edge defeated John Cena. And then you had the match in Canada, the TLC match, where John Cena defeated Edge. Say what you want about those matches. Maybe you liked them. Maybe you didn't. But they were hot. There's no question. They were hot. They were interesting. They're still interesting. Those matches are very, very engaging. Every time I've gone back and watched those. Like, I remember at the time not being that into Edge and Cena just because I was kind of cool on everything on the product, like most Attitude Era kids were in the mid-2000s. But those matches really, really hold up. And then fast forward they do technically face it at WrestleMania against another Cena opponent. So we want to include all the matches. We would have Edge and Big Show at WrestleMania in 2009. You guys remember that? That was like for the love of Vicky Guerrero. I'm not even kidding about that. That's like what the match was about. But that was a title match. And then a month later at Backlash, the last man standing match with Edge and John Cena. That was a fantastic match. And I loved the build to that match. If you recall, it was strictly Cena being like, "You hate me. We've done this a million times. Let's get over this." And again, at the time, me on the message boards there, filling all kinds of piss and vinegar, couldn't believe that Edge and Cena were doing it again, and what a affront it was to wrestling. I'm looking at all these matches. They had the cash in, but and the Rumble match was bad. That was bad because I think Cena was starting to get booed, and they were really struggling about how to really present that. Other than that, everything else they did was basically a classic. I think Edge is in the mix always of the top 2 or 3 greatest of all of John Cena's rivals. Bummer we couldn't get him on this tour, but oh well. We can live with that. I just need him. Adam, yeah. Cope. I need him to just kind of stay making his movie. Just for like a year longer. There was a certain addition by subtraction in AEW that happened a few months ago. So let's keep it that way. All right, one of our big ones. Now, this guy's so mad about how he just got usurped. But if we're talking opponents of Cena in the mid 2000s, his other rival that's not a member of the class of 02 was, well, everybody's rival in this era. I'm talking, of course, about the H-Man. Hunter Hearst Helmsley. The game, who's going to pin Cena in the middle of the ring. That's my best rock impression. The King of Kings, Triple H. Now, before we talk about it, we should know, again, another one with a lot of multi-person matches against Cena. Some really good, there's like 3 really good triple threats that Cena and Triple H were involved in. And the other party tended to be Randy Orton or Shawn Michaels. And those matches were great. But in terms of singles matches, they also had some notable ones. You did have a WrestleMania main event. And unlike the match against JBL the year before, this truly was the main event. This was the closer for the biggest title on the show. So you have the true main event. No build to that main event. I actually rewatched at WrestleMania recently. I was going to do this whole thing on Triple H and Cena's weird rivalry. But even on the show, like the build is the press conference that happened like the day before. That's it. The whole build to the show, the whole build to the match was John Cena can't wrestle. Triple H can. Oh no, John Cena's probably going to lose. But he ended up winning. Now, after that, again, they're involved in a lot of multi-person matches together. They have a very underrated match in 2008 at Night of Champions. I thought that match was very, very good at the time. It was just weird because they were splitting them off into different shows. So it was such a one-off. And I think they promoted it as actually being more epic than it was, but it was very, very good. The two of them had better chemistry together than I think most of us would like to remember. Now, when they faced at the Greatest Royal Rumble, years later, they did not quite have it. That was a favor to the Saudis. I'm going to put Triple H B tier. 3 matches is kind of hard to go above. And I do think 2 of the 3 matches were very good. And I think that main event is very good. But it's just not as integral of a pay-per-view opponent to Cena's career. Like, I hate to say it, Trips, but if John Cena never faced you, he could kind of have mostly the same career. There's going to be another person, spoiler, that had lesser matches with John Cena and is going to be higher than Triple H. But that's where the game goes. I'm sure he's going to edit this out of how dare we question his promoting. All right, that person's actually coming up right now. Didn't know that. All right, this person only has one pay-per-view match against John Cena. Count him. One single solo. However, it's just kind of like one of the greatest pay-per-view matches of all time. It's one of the coolest environments of all time. It's one of a series of the coolest shows of all time. And there's Money in the Bank, there's Extreme Rules 2012, there's WrestleMania 28, there's WrestleMania 22. There's a lot of hostile environments that John Cena was in, but I don't think any of them can compare to the hostility he faced at ECW One Night Stand 2006. Yes, it's one match. RVD absolutely deserves to be an S tier opponent of John Cena. John Cena gained so much out of that match. That was the first one because I think after WrestleMania, it just looked like maybe this whole thing's a failure. What's going on? That was the first match where this whole thing where Cena can come in and work a heel in the match, but still basically be a babyface on the show, but be a heel in the match, in the setting, and just give you one of the most entertaining spectacles that any of us have ever seen. I think only RVD and that ECW environment could have really brought that to fruition. So for that reason, and again, some people may take issue with it, he had like 5 matches against Brock. He had 1 against RVD. 1. I assume they may have had more. The problem was RVD and the person we're going to talk about next just kind of had their issues on a nice drive they were taking. Now, and E, you're going to feel this. If they take that trip today, he's probably champion for like another 5 months. So I think we shouldn't let RVD's limited reign cloud how important he was to John Cena. Now, the next person, someone that RVD was actually very close to, and unfortunately, the first person on this list, one of at least 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, 3 actually, that is no longer with us. And of course, I was talking about RVD, and if we're gonna talk RVD, his cousin, the late great Sabu, is usually not far behind. Now, you guys probably forgot that Sabu and John Cena ever had a pay-per-view match. But it was actually kind of cool. It was a tables match way back in Vengeance of 06. Like a lot of the promotion was not cool at this time. This was right after the ECW merger and then the ECW on Sci-Fi and all of that. I shouldn't have called it a merger. It's not like they bought the company. They just put the show on. You had all of that going on. You had all that Spirit Squad, Vince McMahon, the Uncool DX. Like all of that is going on. You would think during that time period that Sabu would have had a terrible run. His run was actually pretty good. And he got a match with John Cena out of it. He didn't match with Rey Mysterio. I mean, he did a lot of matches with establishment WWE guys in that time period. But it was only one match. And I thought it was a tables match, but it looks like maybe it was a lumberjack match. Regardless, it was one match. It was a cool match. So this is not a bad grade and a negative. It's just not very significant to John Cena's career. But it is going to go ahead of Rene Dupree. So rest in peace, Sabu. All right. Now we talked about the people who had passed away, and this person, the anniversary of their passing was very, very recently. In fact, he was bringing it up in the chat. And this is a big opponent for John Cena. I'm talking, of course, about the late, great Umaga. Now, Umaga made an impact in WWE, but there's not a lot of high-profile matches that you actually remember Umaga for. You just more remember the presence of Umaga, the family, obviously. I think his passing comes up a lot. The lack of acknowledgement that that people have shown to that WWE in specific. the lack of acknowledgement that WWE shown for his passing at the time. So you had all of that. With that said, I think the biggest and best thing he did in his very short run with WWE were his 2 matches with John Cena. I would say Umaga is the first ever opponent that you can credit John Cena with getting over in that kind of way. We're talking about the series of matches that happened towards the end of 06, early 07, and they were both officially in 07. There was the match at New Year's Revolution, which was pretty good. And then there was the awesome Last Man Standing match that they had at the Royal Rumble. John Cena's 2007 is a year to be studied. Maybe if I'd have launched this channel a little bit sooner, we could have really broken down that year in detail. Because John Cena has a lot of these kind of average opponents or unconventional opponents that he ends up just having really, really good matches with. So, yeah, E, you're going to be disappointed. But I am going to keep him C tier in terms of opponents. But look at what this C tier is turning into. This C tier is the people that Cena won his first titles from, the people that sort of introduced Cena in there, the people that Cena built his stuff off. He's definitely ahead of Booker T, and you could even say maybe ahead of Big Show, definitely ahead of Undertaker, probably. In fact, I will throw that there. So he's a pretty top tier C tier. But at the end of the day, it is only 2 matches, and only one of them was super great. It was awesome. It stood out. It got my attention, but it's only going to be C tier on this list. All right. Now, this one's going to be controversial as well, and it's going to be C tier, but for a little bit different reason. There is almost no list of greatest wrestling anything that ever includes Shawn Michaels, and Shawn Michaels isn't at the very top of that. If this was an overall overview of matches that John Cena and Shawn Michaels had, Shawn Michaels might be a little bit higher on this list because not only was he involved in many multi-person matches with John Cena, he was also involved in that legendary hour-long match on Raw. It was the greatest thing ever, right? Randy Orton trashes the hotel room. We've lost our main event. Cena and HBK go out there with a WrestleMania main event rematch and tear down the house for an hour. Unfortunately, that match wasn't on pay-per-view. These two, in a singles capacity, how did this happen? I think it's the guy with the big nose. It's got to be his fault. How did they only have one singles pay-per-view match against each other? The only other factor I could really put in is being that they were both baby faces, that they never figured out how to do that feud. I don't know. Like, just how did it never happen? We have a good 5 years of the active career of both individuals, mostly on the same show the entire time, and they don't have a singles pay-per-view match against each other other than the main event of WrestleMania, which isn't insignificant, but it's only one match. And it's a pretty good match, but let's be honest, that Raw match is about 10 times better. I think the WrestleMania match is and has become underrated, but it is only one match. And therefore, for the purposes of this list, Shawn Michaels will be C tier. All right, we're making some progress here. Minimal, but it is some. Okay. Next up, the person who I will not be doing a tribute to, the Great Khali. Now, I'm going to put Khali D tier because these matches are nothing special, and there was only 2 of them on pay-per-view. With that said, John Cena deserves a ton of credit for making both of the matches they had on pay-per-view mildly interesting. Mildly interesting. And again, it's Kali. So there's a certain ceiling there. Like, I have much more reverence for the Umaga Cena matches than I do for the Kali Cena matches. They happen in the same year, and they're both examples of early examples of John Cena, despite being the guy who, quote, can't wrestle, being able to carry other people to pretty good stuff. The chemistry kind of works in some ways because it's very rare that John Cena was the smaller opponent. So every now and then he gets a big show, he gets a Kali, and he gets to be the smaller guy. And his whole vibe and everything he's trying to pull off actually works in that situation. So again, D tier, but I wouldn't be that ashamed of this level of D tier. There's only a couple, like Rene Dupree doesn't really mean much so far. There's a couple that are going to go into D tier on this list that are just straight up bad because they were bad wrestlers and nothing else mattered. But I would say like Sabu, Kali, those are decent D tiers. All right, we have a heavy hitter coming up. The person that John Cena faced the most on pay-per-view, and probably the person who isn't his greatest rival. If you say greatest rival off the top of your head, you're going to say AJ, Edge, or Punk. But if you say like his most frequent rival and his most associated with rival, that one's pretty easy. And you guys know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the man, Randall Keith Orton. Anyone seen him lately? Do we know where he is? Because I feel like we're always getting these reports that he's back soon, but we never actually see the guy. Now, when we look at my man, Randy, over here, unbelievably, and I did a Nocturnal Knockout episode about their entire rivalry. Unbelievably, they didn't meet on pay-per-view till 2007 in a singles capacity, which blows my mind. They had met previously at a fatal four-way at the Backlash of 07, but it wasn't until SummerSlam 07. And they had their series of matches over the summer of 07 until John Cena got hurt. Cena comes back and he cashes in his Royal Rumble win. He's the surprise at the Royal Rumble in 08. But he cashes in the Royal Rumble win a month early at No Way Out because he's stupid, I guess. I don't know. Against Randy Orton, and Orton obviously gets out of there with the DQ because that's how all of the Orton matches ended in that time. That was a long time ago. That's what I'm saying. Like, where's he been? That was like a while back. It seems like not that long ago because time is a flat circle. But so you have the singles match in 08. You also have multi-person title matches that they have the next couple of months. Nothing really comes of that. Fast forward to summer and fall of 09, and they have matches at 4 consecutive pay-per-views, ending in three consecutive pay-per-views, ending in the really, really long Iron Man match. You guys remember that one? That was oh wait, it was 4 matches. Never mind. It was 4 matches. That was the hardcore Iron Man match. That's a good match, but I saw enough of Orton and Cena wrestling in every other match to never want to actually see it again. An hour, we didn't need an hour. I think the debate here, though, in terms of categorizing him as a pay-per-view opponent, because of the volume, he definitely is A tier or S tier. The volume kind of makes me want to put him S tier because everything's pretty much for the title or something very, very important. They would also meet they would reset that a few times in the 2010s and very recently met on pay-per-view. I'm going to say he's ahead of Brock, but he's A tier. Their rivalry just isn't good enough. It's not. So if you look at the big 4 we have up here so far, Edge, RVD, Brock, and Orton. Some of the Brock matches are hit or miss, but the difference between Orton and Cena and all of the rest of them, I would say, is the rewatchability factor, the timelessness of it. He's got the volume. He's positioned well as an all-time rival of his. But it's just A tier for purposes of this list. Next up, and we have basically the class of '02 covered now, Dave Bautista. This is another tricky one that actually deserves a little bit of reflection. Now, Batista actually didn't spend as much time on pay-per-view with John Cena as you would have thought, but I think there's a pretty good reason for it. Whereas Orton and Cena were always seemingly paired up, Batista and Cena were always separated. They were always on different brands until they weren't. They were basically the cornerstone baby faces of their show. The the Cena Batista split when you go post WrestleMania 21 is, I think, the brand split being used to what they intended it to be used for. Like, we have our two new stars, and they're on kind of equal footing and taking over these new shows. Eventually, they got swapped, and Cena became the A side. Well, I guess you could say Batista became the B side. They didn't meet on pay-per-view in a singles capacity till 2008, SummerSlam 2008, a match I referenced earlier, which was a great match with a really cool build, and with both guys selling storyline and real injuries after it. So both guys were out for a little while after it, and that really added to selling the importance. And it was one of those great like babyface versus babyface matches. And then fast forward though, let's skip '09 and go into 2010, and we have the Big Dave heel run. And we get them actually meeting technically 4 times on pay-per-view, but one of them was just the cash-in. If I'm John Cena and I win an elimination chamber, I am running out of that chamber. If someone has the Money in the Bank contract, they're going to cash in on John Cena right after the match. I think this was Vince that brought him down to cash in on Cena. Remember, sometimes they would pretend like Cena and Vince were Vince and Austin, and they would kind of go back and forth on that. But you do have the title change there, which really leads us to, I think, another underrated match of theirs and the underrated series that they had in 2010. I really appreciated the WrestleMania match. I think WrestleMania 26 is thought of as a one-match show. It's the Shawn Michaels retirement outside of Saudi Arabia match, and that match was very good. In my opinion, it's better than the Undertaker match that Shawn Michaels had at WrestleMania 25. Be that as it may, I really liked the title match on the undercard just below it that Cena and Batista had. It wasn't as good of a match, but the whole concept was kind of cool. Kind of sounding as like their version of Hogan Warrior, maybe Rock Austin. Of course, those things would be closing out the show. They would not be on the co-main. And then they faced off in pay-per-view for the next few months. You had the last man standing match, where I want to say Cena taped Batista up, and then you had an I Quit match. Which, again, who in the hell would face John Cena in an I Quit match? It's like facing Kane in the First Blood match. Or, well, let's see. Kane is meant to lose Inferno match. Like, he's the guy that gets set on fire. Undertaker's meant to get buried in the casket. He's the guy that goes in there. Cena's the guy that doesn't give up. So don't get into an I Quit match with him. You're going to lose. That sounds awesome. No, I actually don't. I don't play wrestling video. I don't play a lot of video games. Period. My son does. He'll play the wrestling video games and all the other video games, and like I play like the sports games. I like anyone my age. I'm proud that the college football game is back. I'll play a little Madden. I love 2K, but I'm just not a big gamer overall. Batista, I don't think is a big gamer. He's Drax the Destroyer, the movie star, cultural icon. Maybe the most successful wrestler turned actor. For purposes of this list, he's A tier. Look at that. He beat out Trips, beat out JBL. Good for him. Couldn't quite get up there with RVD and Edge. Let's see. Where are we? We're almost down. We've almost have a row cleared. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with me still. Next up, we got Sheamus. And, Sheamus comes out the other night. Part of the Last Time Is Now tournament. They're making it like there's just this great historical rivalry between Sheamus and Cena. They have been on pay per view, and it has been notable. Sheamus did win a title off of Cena, but it's not the grandest of rivalries, okay? He won the title in a tables match, right? The worst way anyone, the most like non-affirming way I think you can win a title is probably winning it in a tables match. But hey, he beat John Cena. He also kind of subtly retired Triple H, but we don't talk about that as much. Something else we don't talk about, Money in the Bank 2010. When you say Money in the Bank, we're talking about 2011. That's the big one. The 2012 show is fairly notable. I'm a big fan of 2016. Money in the Bank, it's that fringe Big Four pay-per-view. The first one, though, Money in the Bank 2010, no one remembers that show. Nobody remembers that show. Did you remember that Sheamus and Cena had a steel cage match? Because I sure as hell didn't. I don't recall that at all. It's a great to have another gimmick on a show that the whole premise is that there's going to be some ladder matches, but we have to main event with a cage match. It's almost like they didn't have enough things to throw at the fans in that era. Next one is tragic, not in the sad kind of way, but just like, oh, what could have been. Speaking of the League of Nations, someone whose commentary sometimes I love and sometimes I can't stand. Mr. Wade Barrett. Nexus Wade Barrett, to be exact. Now, Wade Barrett and John Cena had a lot of interaction. A lot, okay? But only 2 pay-per-view singles match. Now, if this were to include every John Cena pay-per-view match, the Nexus and Wade Barrett would have way more significance. Simply because the ultimate Super Cena moment is SummerSlam 2010. And I think like it even, Jericho and Edge like to needle him about it. Everyone has acknowledged that was the wrong choice to make. Killed the Nexus dead. But he had other matches with Wade Barrett. Wade Barrett actually defeated him in Hell in a Cell in 2010. Did he have to join the Nexus from that? I actually don't remember that. Was that the match that he had to join the Nexus for him? And then that's how we got Juan Cena, right? Like, that's the nexus of all of that. And then, of course, in a chairs match, John Cena defeated Wade Barrett, literally buried him in the match. We turned the corner to 2011. We start getting into WrestleMania 27. And Wade Barrett ain't shit in that era. That was kind of the beginning and the end of Wade Barrett's run. 2 pay-per-view matches. I want to put Wade Barrett, not Keller. Wade Keller's a S tier. I'm going to put him D tier. I don't feel good about it, but we have a strong C tier here with some pretty big significance. You know what? We're dropping the Undertaker. Undertaker's falling out of the C tier. That's my big adjustment. Instead of moving Wade up to C tier, I'm going to move Undertaker down to D tier. All right. Another interesting opponent of John Cena. The Miz. Now, they had a lot of interaction on pay-per-view, and they had a WrestleMania interaction that won't be factored in here because it was like an engagement match with Maurice and Nikki Bella. If Nikki's going to reset that one on her nostalgia run that's going so well right now. Miz is interesting. So they have their first match on pay-per-view back in 2009 at The Bash. Very, very short. Again, it was wild because Miz was totally getting over on TV. That character was getting over, and that really was the feud, but somehow the matches always ended up going to the Big Show. You guys remember Miz Show, speaking of? Doesn't that feel so early 2010s? So like pre NXT WWE. Well, after watching the screen right now, the Misfits logo on my shirt is growing out of D-Bry's head. That's an amazing, amazing optical illusion. But let's face it, the Miz's biggest claim to fame was that he main evented a WrestleMania against John Cena. Never mind the fact that the whole story of the match, the feud in the next few years was about John Cena and The Rock. The Miz actually walked into the main event with the title. And how can we forget about the time John Cena captured and killed Osama bin Laden after defeating The Miz at that pay-per-view? You guys remember that? I do. Compromise to a permanent end. I don't even think that counted on this list. We have the I Quit match. Well, because was that the same one? Alex Riley might have been involved in that match. I don't know. I'm too tired to look it up. We're gonna put Miz C tier. It's hard to main event a WrestleMania with someone and still be C tier, but Miz finds a way. Miz is a good opponent, a solid opponent, but just doesn't have the juice that anyone above him has, and doesn't really have the same kind of significance to Cena's career. If you think about it, Miz has been used to further other storylines that Cena's got going on, like his storyline with The Rock that lasted a few years, or his storyline with Nikki Bella that lasted 3 to 5 years, depending on who you ask. Okay, this one's gonna hurt you guys. I love him. I love him as much as anyone. But R-Truth and John Cena only met on pay-per-view once. It was Capital Punishment 2011. So, unfortunately, my man Truth, and we talked about this on the Nocturnal Knockout a few months ago during the whole is he or isn't he fired era. Capital Punishment, the build is kind of cool. The match is nothing. And I always think about it like this. If CM Punk kind of reset wrestling at Money in the Bank 2011, it needed to be reset from something. And I think the something it needed to be reset from was R-Truth and John Cena in the main event the month before. It was big for R-Truth's character. They would actually meet up later on in the year in a tag match, teaming with The Miz and The Rock, but that one doesn't get factored into this list. So, unfortunately, R-Truth's feud with his childhood hero lands him in the D tier. Mm-hmm. Bald Rob is ruthless. The other thing Bald Rob can't do, so if we ever watch a video on this, I'm going to have to put the hat on. I can't do the heads. I look like Scott Van Pelt, but like without the talent. I can't do the headset with the bald head. No. So I got to put on the headset for something. The flat brim Rob, which is I think my default setting. This is more like a DLC Rob. I think that's the one. All right, let's get our next S tier up here. Why don't we? We're talking 2011. Wait, is he even on? Did I not? Oh yeah, there it is. I was like, did I not make this guy? Philip effing Brooks. Chick Magnet Punk. Unquestionably an S tier opponent of John Cena. Definitely ahead of RVD. The debate with Edge, I think, is an eternal barroom streaming. Me and E are going to be very old on some kind of AI streaming platform where there's just like an avatar of what we look like. And we're going to be debating like Edge and Punk as and Tony D as the greatest of all time. No, E, that Rob is really ruthless. That Rob learned how to like live stream though, and so in other live streams I've done, when I've had other chatters that aren't as welcoming as you are, E, I'll put on that character. Yeah, that guy's rough. I don't like that guy. That guy's kind of rough, and I do something slightly different now too, but definitely it's still in the realm. Now, if you want to criticize me making Cena if you want to criticize me making Punk S tier, you say, well, they only had 4 matches. But think about the 4 matches that these guys had with each other. So you've got Money in the Bank 2011. Again, one of the greatest title matches, one of the great pay-per-views that they ever did. Iconic, everything about it. We don't need to rehash that. WWE will, plenty of times. Then they meet the month later at SummerSlam. Now, historically low purchase SummerSlam. Punk and Cena did kill the business there. And you had like the bumbling, stumbling Triple H of a ref. Decent match, though. Big time. Still felt like big stakes. And they would meet throughout the rest of the year, in a lot of multi-person matches. But they have a double pin at Night of Champions in 2012. And in 2012, that's their only singles match on pay-per-view, but you have Bryan Danielson and Kane kind of getting involved. They do basically face each other again at a series of matches. And then not on this list, but probably the best match from an in-ring perspective they ever had against each other was that match in early 2013, which set up the Twice in a Lifetime. All right. Oh, yeah. Don't forget that they also met up at Champions in Saudi Arabia. And all I got to say about that wasn't that a fun era? Like, so if 2005 is the original Summer of Punk and 2011 is the WWE version of Summer of Punk, I think 2025 can be like the summer that everyone hated Punk. Like, Punk's kind of reset now into being just sort of like a kind of a beloved veteran, top guy. There's definitely people who still don't like him and who will never like him. But the anti-CM Punk sentiment this summer was something, right? Wasn't quite AEW anti-CM Punk sentiment, but very much related. Also, Hangman Adam Page having his rise over the summer didn't help that either. Neither did this match with this guy. All right. You know what? A ton of matches with John Cena, and who we're gonna have to really go between B and C here. I hate to say it, because you're not gonna see him on any form of AAA television that you see on WWE television. But Alberto Del Rio. Let me run down all the matches they had. Night of Champions 2011, title match. Vengeance 2011, title match. Hell in a Cell 2013, title match. Survivor Series 2013, title match. Hell in a Cell 2015, U.S. title match. A returning Del Rio after one of his little exits from the company. Their volume of matches is huge. Do you remember any of them? Any of them? I'm begging you. People remember Del Rio winning the Rumble. You remember his stuff with Big Show. I remember some stuff with Mysterio. Other than the return match he had in 2015, I recall nothing about any of their matches. So despite that very high volume, Del Rio stays C tier. Okay. Here's a tough one. What do we do with Kane and Cena? Again, two guys that were around forever. However, they only have 2 pay-per-view matches. Now, there's been many a time where you needed to book a Raw main event, you had to book Kane versus Cena. Remember the Authority era, how many times we got Kane versus Cena? I'm okay if we never see Kane versus Cena again. In fact, I'm pretty positive we're never going to see any of these matches again. That's why I'm doing the show. But Kane and Cena only actually have 2 singles pay-per-view matches. And it was in the commission of the Zack Ryder feud. And it was like the faux heel turn of John Cena in progress to get ready for The Rock. This was fascinating stuff. So you got a double countout at the Royal Rumble in 2012, which, let's face it, Cena was only in that match because you knew he was going to face The Rock at WrestleMania, so there really wasn't a point that year for him to be in the Royal Rumble. And then Cena defeated him in an ambulance match at Elimination Chamber. This was all just about keeping Cena busy until he faced The Rock. These matches are really nothing. Kane put on he was on mask for years before that. He put the mask back on. He started talking weirdly with no passion. Faces Orton and beats Orton the next month at WrestleMania. Funny enough. By the parameters of this list, two fairly insignificant matches. In fact, Booker's getting knocked down too. Booker probably goes about right here. Kane is D tier on this list. Sorry, Booker, that you got downgraded because it's one of those things like you're in so much trouble that your brother's gonna get punished. Kind of what happened to Booker there. Like I downgraded Kane so much that the Booker T ended up getting downgraded. I'm sorry, Booker, you didn't deserve it. You know who deserves to be D tier? People power. Johnny Ace. I'm innocent. As a human being, Johnny Ace is D tier. Seemingly as a creative too. Like no one other than like Mama Bella has ever liked Johnny Ace. And he's like just a horrible person overall. And he main evented a pay-per-view with John Cena. Drove poor my friend CM Punk right out of the company. Just drove CM Punk away by main eventing with Johnny Ace. People power. All right. These guys only have two pay-per-view matches, but I'm going to say at least A tier, if not S, but I'm leaning A. The final boss, The Rock. Now, Cena and The Rock are entangled in a lot of pay-per-view stuff over the years. You got the heel turn that they're involved in. You have them interacting next to each other at WrestleMania 32. You have basically the storyline of WrestleMania 27 being maybe they'll argue with each other. But you have back-to-back WrestleMania main events, two of the biggest matches in wrestling history, WrestleMania 28 and WrestleMania 29. WrestleMania 28 is not a great match, but it's pretty good. It's as good as like a retired guy and not the greatest wrestler of all time could have in that setting. Their match the next year, WrestleMania 29, is terrible. They just spam finishers against each other, and eventually, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, it lands on John Cena. The reason why, though, I think this is so important for John Cena is not necessarily the magnitude of those matches, but to me, this feud, more than the feuds of Punk, with AJ, with RVD, with Edge, than any of those, this is the feud that I think really, really legitimized John Cena. And I don't think The Rock made him look good either. That's the thing about it. A lot of these other opponents, their job was to make John Cena look good. The Rock's job here was to sell the match and make The Rock look good. Now, ultimately, the goal was to get Cena over, I think. But again, it's like The Rock facing Hogan at that point. He's already over. He's already a made guy. A Mount Rushmore type of guy at that point. But I think what he did in those promos and just like showing that The Rock was a little bit outdated, a little bit older, and not really of this time was shocking to people. I mean, you had people claiming that there was a shoot going on, all kinds of stuff. And I think when you've heard Cena talk about it, it's more just like everyone was really friendly to The Rock, and they kind of left Cena do his own thing. But Cena outdid him in the promos week after week, and you could not have ever got me to predict 2009, 2010, 2011 that in a Rock versus Cena feud, Cena would be the better one on the mic. So for all those reasons, The Rock is definitely an A-tier opponent of John Cena. All right, he's here to show the world. Dolph Ziggler. Now, Dolph and Cena feels like a Ryder Cena thing to me. I don't know if they were ever friends. According to like Total Divas lore, it seems like I don't know. It feels like Dolph could have come back and had a whole relationship with Nikki while she was dating Cena, and Cena would have been like, well, those are the breaks. I wish Dolph could have had a better career. I really do. This is not indicative of his career. but it is indicative of his time feuding with Cena. Maybe if he would have had a better feud with Cena, he would have had a better career. But I mean, even this was cloaked in like AJ Lee and Big E and all of that stuff. Dolph Ziggler, maybe some Vicky Guerrero hanging around there. I don't think so. Dolph Ziggler, unfortunately, D tier on this one. Just these names we're going through right now, they all reek of, I guess you would say, like early 2010s, pre NXT is kind of a thing, but pre like NXT being cool. And NXT wrestlers really flooded up the main roster. We got a lot of like FCW, OVW crew that never quite panned out, or there's issues with and whatnot. And when I think of guys like that, what better example than the Ryback? Ryback was really gonna be something, wasn't he? How's his like podcast doing, or his indie wrestling career? All the things we heard about Ryback doing. Now I get it. In another era, Ryback is totally main event, right? And he was pushed at main event at different times in his career, and he got over a few times. CM Punk's comments certainly didn't help him in the long run, and probably that sentiment was probably felt by some other people. Ryback wasn't good; he was just over. That makes almost no sense, but it's true if you think about it for a second. He does only have 2 pay-per-view matches with John Cena. They were coming out of WrestleMania. You have Extreme Rules 2013, which I think was actually supposed to be something else. I don't know, because I think Brock was kind of supposed to get involved, and The Rock was around. We ended up with Cena versus Ryback, and in a no contest. Then we had a 3 stages of hell match because we all asked for that at Payback. And LOL, John Cena won. Again, I had to really think hard about like what did they do on pay-per-view? They did that. And therefore, I'm not going to feed him anymore. Ryback's going to be D tier. All right. So the next one only has 1 match. But I have to at least put it C tier because of the promo that led to this match. And if you're following along the timeline, you know what I'm talking about. Mr. Salmon Jacket himself, Mark Henry. Just what a boring, god-awful Raw we're watching in the middle of summer of 2013, which is a god-awful time. Post-WrestleMania before SummerSlam in 2013 is terrible. Terrible programming. One really cool thing, and not that it was cool that it was happening, but something that was received very well, was the alleged retirement of Mark Henry. He put on the salmon jacket, gave the most genuine promo anyone has ever heard. And then John Cena comes out and interrupts him. Has to still hold the glory. So he got put in the Hall of Pain. And it was a swerve retirement. Unfortunately, John Cena got the win. Before that promo alone, not for the match, not for the series, they only met once. All those other parameters should be D tier. That promo, that salmon jacket, everything about that. And you know what? Let's face it. This whole run, along with the stuff he did with Orton in 2011, let's not forget that. But I think you put all that together, it kind of made Mark Henry. So I'm keeping Mark Henry C tier here. Make your own list if you don't agree. Here's a tough one. His on-again, off-again brother-in-law at the time in the Total Divas tribute match, Daniel Bryan. Or Bryan Danielson. Who I do not have an avatar of. I just realized. Oh, wait. Yes, I do. I'm looking at the wrong one. I've been talking to you guys for an hour and a half. I'm tired. Wait, like, so Shane, I didn't even put Sheamus up. Wait, hold on. Did I put someone else up instead of Sheamus? I don't think so. Sheamus was C tier. I don't remember what happened there. Oops. Okay. Now, look at what we got left here. Now we're getting to the nitty gritty. Now, Daniel Bryan only had one pay per view match with John Cena. But by my RVD logic, that match was so freaking awesome that it goes up several tiers. Now, it had nowhere near the significance of the match he had with the RVD. And there's just not enough volume to put him on an A tier or B tier. To me, Daniel Bryan, this is solid C territory because they only had one match. That match is freaking phenomenal, though. That match is amazing. That pay-per-view, SummerSlam 2013, very, very good pay-per-view. You got Punk versus Lesnar in that like street fight style match they had. Del Rio and Christian have a good match on that show. Everything on that show is really, really good. Especially the main event with Cena doing the shoulder injury and losing to him clean, too. There was a big moment for Daniel Bryan. We talk a lot about Orton and Bryan because that was what carried us into WrestleMania and that led into Batista and the Authority. But this is kind of part of the gem of it. This comes off of the stuff he was already doing with Orton because you had the cash in after the match, he being Daniel Bryan. But this comes off of the Kane stuff also. Like, so it all kind of transitions into this main event, Daniel Bryan, that we got to enjoy for a little while. Not too long. We can't have nice things. All right. This next one will be by looking at it, yes. Fortunately, this is the final person that we're going to discuss who it is no longer with us. Of course, I'm talking about the late, great Bray Wyatt. Bray and Cena had a lot going on together, if you recall. 3 total pay-per-view matches, actually a series. And they were sequential. They feuded for a lot longer than that. Bray was interfering in Cena matches for a few months prior to the first match they had at WrestleMania, with sort of a take on the embrace the hate concept that they did with Kane a couple years earlier. And that was the whole story of that match. Outside of the last match they had together, I don't think any of their matches were particularly good. But it was kind of an all-consuming opponent for Cena, and it looked like something that they put a lot of effort into. I don't think they thought about the wins and losses as much and how much that would hurt Bray going forward, because I think Bray was very much hurt by this feud. Him coming out looking so much worse after feuding with Cena didn't look good for either individual, but especially not for Bray. And then I felt like his career never really rebounded from this series. Be that as it may, it's one of the last times I think we saw John Cena fully engaged in something like this. In a multi-month series with a quasi main event that I think was meant to get Bray over, but failed in the way they constructed the matches and the layout of everything. Now that last match they have, it's very good. It's a last man standing match. Chaos all over the place with the Wyatts getting involved. It's fun. The WrestleMania match tells like a nice story, but it's mostly like Cena looking at a chair. The Extreme Rules match in the steel cage also is a little funky. That's the kid with he's got the whole world in his hand. I think the sentiments that we have towards Bray, make me want to put him B tier. I don't know that his contributions are quite to that level though. So I think he's on the BC bubble. I'm gonna put him towards the top of C tier. They also had the Firefly Funhouse, or not the Firefly Funhouse match, the comedy. What the hell's that match called? The Flyer. I don't know, the match they had at the Pandemic WrestleMania where John Cena also turned heel and joined the NWO. And now thinking about that match, yeah, I'm gonna leave Bray B tier. And I wasn't the biggest Bray fan during his career. It never clicked with me, but I think there was significance there. All right, this next one's a top level C tier opponent. In fact, there's a temptation to make this person B level, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go with the Visionary, the Monday Night Messiah, Seth freaking Rollins. Now, Rollins and Cena have about 4 interactions on premium live events. They did. I will note too. They did have a match on an MSG show that was basically a house show that aired on the WWE Network. So I won't count that one, but that one did happen as well. It was right before Seth Rollins got injured as a part of the runs that he was on with the U.S. title and the world title. And that is mostly where their interaction happens on pay-per-view. They have a match on pay-per-view in late 2014, which leads into the Royal Rumble match that turns into a triple threat with Brock Lesnar, which is a very, very good match, just not included on this list. They meet, though, for the world heavyweight title and the U.S. title at SummerSlam 2015. This was White Ranger Seth Rollins, the one pictured on there, having some interesting interaction there, because there was a lot going on. Was that two matches? Let me look that up. I haven't looked up anything. I've been taking everything off my notes. Did he have two matches at SummerSlam 2015? Because if he did, then I have my facts a little bit wrong. Oh, yeah, that was the kick each other in the drunk match that was going on with Undertaker. No, Wikipedia, I'm not going to donate to you right now. Okay, I got a stream with like half a person watching. I know Jon Stewart does get involved. Okay, that's what it was. That's what it was. Okay, I had this completely wrong. I was getting confused. That's right. That's right. John Cena goes into the match as the U.S. champion. That's correct, because he had just had the feud with Rusev and all that. He goes into the match and Kevin Owens. He goes into the match as the U.S. champ. Loses it. It was a double title match because Seth Rollins was the world champion. Jon Stewart gets involved because he doesn't want Cena to become the 60, because he's a big Ric Flair fan. It was like the storyline. The guy from New York was a huge Ric Flair fan. So that's how they kind of got out of that. And then that was a great match, though. High risk, high injury probabilities. Not as much injuries that happened the next month. Now, the next month, people don't remember. This is where I was getting confused about the double duty. It was the next month that Seth Rollins worked double duty. He had a pretty good match with John Cena, which led right into his match with Sting. Now, the guy who does double duty, that's the guy you think could be at risk for a career-shortening or career-ending injury. No. It was like the 60-year-old guy they had taking buckle bombs. That's the guy who ended up getting injured in that main event when he just destroyed Sting. That's what happened. But John Cena got the win over him on that night. So he retired Sting in 2015, and then Sting retired last year. All of those things are true. Also, really good matches. It's at the upper end, but we got C tier here for Seth. Very underrated rival, though, I think, overall, of John Cena. All right. Home stretch here, guys. Home stretch. Well, we've been talking around him. Let's put the Redeemer back up there. Rusev. Rusev is a heck of an opponent, right? I look at Rusev and Bray very similar, but I think Bray had a much better go of the feud with John Cena than Rusev did. Rusev faced him at 4 pay-per-views in 2015. You have Rusev winning by referee's decision at Fastlane. If you remember, it was like a technical submission almost. It was like the closest they were ever going to come to John Cena sort of tapping out. And then you had the title change where John Cena wins the U.S. title at WrestleMania, which leads to all the stuff in the later main event version of John Cena with the U.S. title. Remember that freaking tank that Rusev came out with? Rusev and Lana came out on a tank. That was great. And Lana's been doing a lot of talking, CJ Perry, on these podcasts, so we're getting a little more insight into that era. But, of course, John Cena had to win. And then they had a chain match that John Cena had to win. And then they had an I Quit match that John Cena had to win. And by the summer, Lana was leaving Rusev for Dolph Ziggler. That all sounded like it was really fun. Did wonders for Rusev's career. I wonder why he left. I mean, he was disgruntled in WWE, so he left and became disgruntled in AEW, and now he's. I don't know what he's got going on in WWE. We don't see him that often. They also faced in 2017 in a flag match. Battleground. Classic. Rewatch that. Like, with all the everything coming down from Peacock and all these questions about where the WWE content's going to, and it's going to be in the vault and all that. First thing that I'm going to watch before everything goes off of Peacock is the Cena Rusev flag match. For sure. Right. Let's get a fun one here. All right, this one's going to be B tier. They only had 3 matches, but extreme significance to both people's career. I'm talking, of course, about Kevin Owens. Just the first match they had alone might have been enough for him to place really high on this tier. The fact that they had 2 other really, really good matches, it just helps this and just boosts KO's case. KO was still like an NXT member summer of 2015. And we had pay-per-views like every 2 weeks that summer, which was great. So he comes out and he just cleanly defeats John Cena on pay-per-view. Clean. And is just badass on TV, stepping on the title, doing all that stuff. And this was the NXT champion coming out there and punking John Cena on a weekly basis. John Cena gets the win back at Money in the Bank, and then he gets another win at Battleground. It did weaken KO. Did weaken him for sure. But there was so much goodwill built up from that first match. And in general, this feud just helped onboard KO onto the main roster like nothing else could have. I think this was pretty uncommon because usually if you're going to face Cena, that's probably going to be your last opponent in your rise to the top. Not your first opponent on the main roster as such. Unless you're like this big monster character or something that's going to flame out. But no, this is how we onboarded KO. And it's been up and down since then. But I can say overall, he's had like a legitimate, not just WWE Hall of Fame, like a legitimate WWE borderline Hall of Fame career, and surely a Hall of Fame wrestler by any standards of any Hall of Fame. And John Cena, in terms of his WWE run, is definitely to thank for that in a lot of ways. I think those matches were so important for KO and for Cena too. This is the open challenge era when he's kind of proving that he can hang with the cool kids. Because this is the time that the cool kids from NXT that used to be on the indies were coming in. And the whole thing about these guys is they were supposed to make like the Cenas and the Ortons feel obsolete. As time's gone on, I think the Ortons and the Cenas actually should get credit for adapting so well to being able to hang with those people. Voice is getting gravelly. We're rounding out the 2-hour mark. We only have a couple to go. Okay. AJ Styles. Someone who they've done video packages lately on the rivalry. Someone who probably gave him one of the better matches of the retirement tour. And someone who kind of built a lot of his early career also off of facing John Cena. I'm going to go S tier for AJ Styles and John Cena. They officially, in terms of singles matches, I say only because I feel like they've got 4. They also have some multi-person matches. You have some elimination chamber situations. You have a lot of interaction with them on pay-per-view. You have the big 4 singles matches. You have the really good one at Money in the Bank 2016, the first one. Remember, AJ got there at the beginning of 2016, and he's the redneck rookie losing his teeth to The Miz and jobbing to Chris Jericho at WrestleMania. And then that Roman Reigns series happens, and AJ is just like a guy. It was awesome. For all of us who had watched AJ in TNA over the years and wished that he could have just been mixing it up in WWE where people were actually watching, it's like we got that opportunity. And he still got a lot of guys that he would have faced back then when it was more of like a wrestling magazine discussion. He got to face a lot of those guys in their relative prime and had like awesome matches with most of them. They meet again at SummerSlam. AJ Styles wins that match again. Another great match. Maybe their most underrated match. Because a lot of people talk about the Money in the Bank and they talk about the one we're gonna talk about next. SummerSlam match was great. It was in the middle of the card, and John Cena kind of didn't really retire, but he did the whole laid the elbow pads and the gloves down after that match. I've always interpreted that, because the timeline does line up, as kind of like when The Rock gave thank you to the crowd after Backlash 2003, after the match with Goldberg, where he had to be the heel the whole time. Basically, once the cameras turned off, he got on the mic and said that he was going to be gone for a little while and he misses you all. I kind of feel like AJ was doing something fairly similar in 2016, or excuse me, Cena was doing something fairly similar in 2016 by sort of saying, like, I'm not retiring. He's retiring now. It was more like, I'm transitioning out, and this is not going to be just my place anymore. If you look at the timeline, pretty much since that match, but it happened before that, that's when there was a little bit of a de-emphasizing of John Cena. Now, obviously, if he's around, he's going to be a big-time player, but you had Roman coming up. You had these indie guys that had come in. You had the next crop. John Cena could still work with all those people, but he was going to fade into an elder statesman. I think that match really signifies that. But it didn't mean he was fully washed up yet, because fast forward a few months later, probably the best match that they ever had, and maybe the best match from a technical standpoint of John Cena's career, is him and AJ Styles at the Royal Rumble in 2017. No pun intended, phenomenal match. Just excellent. Like, if you love pro wrestling, watch that match if you haven't watched it. It is great. It's great. Cena wins the title, and again, the booing on Cena had actually cooled a lot since the US Open Challenge. Like, that really did a lot the year before, 2 years before, to get people on Cena's side and to just see him as a sort of legendary wrestler, realize that he was pretty good at actually in ring, and him mixing it up with non-OVW crew really, I think, enhanced and extended that part of his career. But I would say this is the match too where it's like, we're done booing Cena. Cena is just a legendary figure now. And I think that match, I don't know if the match itself contributed to it or the ending of that match and the culmination of that match led to that. I wish Styles would got a little bit more follow-up, but yeah, I mean, a great match with Shane McMahon at WrestleMania that year. I wish it would have been a little more followed up on his character after that, but I can't complain about that. So, spoiler, I don't think our S tier is going to have anyone added to the match. Obviously, I would hear arguments for all three people I have right now in A tier as possible S tier candidates. But for my list, I think that's where it's going to stay. Baron Corbin. Good podcaster, really good podcaster. Not a great wrestler, or at least wasn't presented in the best way. Now, some people loved Baron Corbin as the NXT wrestler. Some people always saw it in him. I think Wade Keller still has his Baron Corbin stock somewhere. Oh, he's not. No, he's not. He's D tier. How dare I put him next to Rusev? Rusev was like mad at. We'll put you. But you go. You get Johnny Ace for sure. Johnny Ace the worst opponent? Yeah, probably. Ryback doesn't even deserve to be on that list. Baron Corbin just decided to put his Money in the Bank on the line against Cena. Remember that? They had that whole situation. And then John Cena also beats him in 10 minutes at SummerSlam. Like, this is the era of John Cena doing. He loses to Shinsuke on TV. I think he lost to. I can't think of his name. The guy used to come out with the Singh brothers. Jinder Mahal. I think he did the honors to Jinder Mahal. He did a lot in that era. No way in hell was he going to lose to Baron Corbin in 2017. And you want to talk about damage that Cena did. Baron Corbin absolutely never recovered from this. Like, he was still on TV a lot, but this was the end. Him losing in this way and just being taken not seriously, seemingly by the company and John Cena, kind of cast the die for even the people that were holding out that he was going to be something. And then, like, a year later, we're stuck in the god-awful 2018, 2019 era of Baron Corbin, which was terrible until he got happy. Once he got happy, that was cool. We like happy Corbin. We don't like brooding, like post-hardcore Corbin. No, I don't like that guy. That guy's no good. All right. Oh, 5 more to go. And these are all fairly recently, so they're fairly recent, so we'll go through them fairly quick. One of the two men on this list that ultimately replaced John Cena, Roman Reigns. You would think that Roman and Cena had matches for days. They didn't. I think mostly it's an issue of timeline, though. Cena's time transitioning out, mid 2010s, obviously correlates directly with the rise of Roman Reigns as a main event player. So Cena just simply wasn't around for a lot of Roman's initial rise to the top. He did come back at No Mercy 2017, John Cena did, to have an amazing feud with Roman Reigns. The match was terrible. It's okay, but it was again 2017. We started 2017 with Cena having like a 5-star against AJ. And we're closing it out with Baron Corbin and Roman Reigns, and these matches aren't great. And that's why I correlate that AJ match as kind of the peak and the end of good wrestling Cena. Now again, the match wasn't any good at No Mercy, but I can listen to not yet found his voice Roman Reigns just get buried by John Cena on the promos. Like talk about No Mercy, there was no mercy had on Roman Reigns in those promos. You know, I'm trying to think that maybe Cena has this thing with Samoans that he just owns them on the mic. The other interaction that they had on a singles capacity was a few years ago for a main event in the Bloodline run. Roman Reigns taking out John Cena, 23 minutes, wasn't anything special. Was meant to get Roman over. Did so effectively in the course of all of that. And 21 is a little bit of a weaker time in the Bloodline run. It picks back up quite a bit in 23. 21 and 22 are a little bit duller. I mean, the run lasted like 5 years, so what do you expect? C tier for Roman Reigns. That's interesting. Those NXT developments are legitimately interesting. I'm actually, I want to catch up on that because it's going to inform a lot of programming going forward. And some of those NXT guys, they're ready. They're ready to pop. It seems like. So I talked about Samoans that he's got an issue with. Solo Sikoa. Anyone? Crown Jewel 2023 defeated John Cena in a 16-minute match, which was sort of the catalyst to eventually John Cena getting involved in the Avengers Endgame WrestleMania 40 main event. Not Solo's fault necessarily, very brief interactions. It is what it is. And Solo's career really hasn't been that great in the last year and a half. So unfortunately, he's a D tier opponent. At this point. Maybe if Cena makes a comeback, Solo will be the only one left for him to wrestle that's on this list. Here's an interesting one. Where do we put Cody Rhodes? A WrestleMania and SummerSlam main eventer this past year with John Cena. Supposed to carry everything for the first ever Cena heel WrestleMania main event. It feels like about 400 years ago, doesn't it? Cody is the other guy that I think Cody... So, Roman Reigns functionally took Cena's place as like the main guy and the main focus. But the person who more aesthetically took Cena's place was Cody Rhodes. But they only had 2 matches together. And their match at WrestleMania 40, my guy Dave Meltzer called it like the worst main event ever. And this guy gave like negative 1 million stars to Hulk and Andre. It's not quite that bad, but it's not good. I rewatched it like one time and it was like, oh yeah. Not only was the storyline bad, but the match was just terrible. Then they had a really, 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 really good match at the recent at SummerSlam. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, I don't know where to put it. Actually, I do. It's gonna be C tier. Not necessarily befitting of Cody's status, but it is what it is. I think John Cena has a lot of significance to Cody's career in a lot of ways, but in terms of opponent, he's at best a C tier opponent, and that's being a little bit generous. Last 2, the most recent pay-per-view opponents. Logan Paul, Clash in Paris. It was only one match. Pretty damn good match, though. It's going to go top of D tier. I mean, it's one pay-per-view match with very brief interactions. The match was it goes right where like the Sabu kind of thing goes. Solid D tier, which is pretty good for Logan Paul. And unfortunately, Dominic Mysterio also finished this up in D tier. Dominic Mysterio, had he been given more time or even a legitimate match with Cena, could actually be higher on this list. It's just the timing of it. He came later. Like, John Cena also doesn't have a pay-per-view match against Rey Mysterio. John Cena's got more pay-per-view singles matches against Dominic Mysterio than he does Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio, Jeff Hardy, a lot of one-offs that he only faced on TV that he could have had instead of having 1,000 matches with Orton, but those are the breaks. All right, let's take a look at this entire tier list as we broke down all the John Cena pay-per-view singles opponents, and I'm exhausted. All right. In the D tier, Wade Barrett, The Undertaker, Kane, Khali, Booker T, Logan Paul, Sabu, Rene Dupree, Dolph Ziggler, R-Truth, Baron Corbin, John Laurinaitis, Ryback, Solo Sikoa, and Dominic Mysterio. A little bit, E. That whole angle kind of got me. I was very confused. In C tier, Kurt Angle, Umaga, The Miz, The Big Show, HBK, Alberto Del Rio, Mark Henry, Sheamus, Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins, Rusev, Roman Reigns, and Cody Rhodes. B tier, JBL, Triple H, Chris Jericho, Bray Wyatt, Kevin Owens. A tier, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Dave Bautista, and The Rock. And your A tier, Edge, CM Punk, RVD, AJ Styles. That is every John Cena. Let me say that again. That is every John Cena's. That is every singles opponent of John Cena on pay-per-view ever ranked. Did you guys like that? Did you guys have fun? Did you have fun, E? I mean, I was here for 2 hours. Technical difficulties to start. Not a bad pilot stream, guys. I don't know if I'm always going to do a 2-hour stream like that that's this extensive, but it was kind of what I could fit in to do a bit of a Cena career retrospective, but in the style that we like to do these streams on. And hopefully I could chop this up and get it to you out as an on-demand video. That way it's there to watch and cherish forever. Don't have an exact streaming schedule down because we're still playing with everything. But I think Tuesdays is a safe bet around this time. 7 to 9 Eastern. That might be the time slot. If and when the Nocturnal Knockout comes in, I'll sort of prioritize that time slot. But stay tuned. You know, I think I should take the Tony Khan approach and just make everything 6 hours long. Like I should have tier listed every opponent he ever had and every match he ever had and like quit my job. I should have probably done that. But to your point, E, this is my channel, so I may want to do like a super, like one that's not really appropriate to do on a Brass Ring or a Studio Sport 1 channel. You got to get the Fonz on there. We got to get Zach on there. We got to get everyone on. This is just my channel. I could stream for however long I've got the stamina for, which in this case was about 2 hours. So E, thank you for hanging out. Great to talk to you. Please continue to spread the word or start spreading the word. We got to get this channel going. This is from the ground up. I'm right here. I'm with the shovel. I'm putting in concrete. You know, we're just coming in. He's like the neighbor down the street. You know, he's bringing stuff in on the welcoming committee, but we need to get this channel going. So I need some likes. I need some shares. I need some subscribers. Most importantly, I need some views. So keep tuned right here to Rob by Wrestling. All right. I'm going to sign off, but I'm going to be very conscious about what I say or do I have no idea if I'm going to sign off correctly. So there's a chance that I sign off of this and I'm just here like scratching my head. But let's see. I will talk to you guys next week.